The 1960s were a decade of change. The rigid social norms of the post-war world were quickly fading away, giving way to new and exciting innovations across various industries. Music icons like Bob Dylan, the Beatles, and the Rolling Stones were on the rise, while the significance of the hippie movement and the famous Woodstock Festival captured the spirit of the era. Change often brings about rapid advancements, and the world of engineering was no exception. The space race and the United States' fulfillment of Kennedy's promise to put a man on the moon before 1970 highlighted a major shift in technology. Technology began to take over factories, redefining assembly lines worldwide, and even early versions of video games were starting to capture the magic of innovation. It was impossible for the motorsports world to remain untouched by this seismic shift, especially not after the legendary 1966 Le Mans showdown between Ford and Ferrari. Manufacturers were on alert, with engineers looking for better ways to dominate the track and push the limb. Amid this buzz, a small German car company entered the fray, determined to make its mark with a machine that would go on to define the next 50 years of motorsports history. It all began with one very special car that would feature in a legendary Hollywood film and eventually be considered one of the most iconic designs the world had ever seen. This is the story of Porsche's. It all started in the latter half of 1967 when, back in the 1960s, Porsche was not known for its ultra-luxury designs as it is today. The company had a modest budget and had never won a World Sports Car Championship. Additionally, Porsche struggled with leadership disputes between two family factions over ownership. In 1965, a young man named Ferdinand Piëch emerged victorious from this dispute, taking charge of Porsche's product testing and development. Piëch was not just any average engineer. He was the grandson of Porsche's founder, Ferdinand Porsche himself. Though he would later achieve major successes like designing the legendary Audi Quattro and leading Volkswagen Group, in the 1960s, the ambitious Piëch, still in his 20s, had only one goal. He wanted to win the grueling 24 hours of Le Mans. Piëch's journey began in 1967 following a change in racing regulations. The motorsport governing body decided that cars were becoming too fast, expensive, and dangerous. As a result, they limited engine capacity to 3 litres. However, regulations also stated that if a manufacturer could produce 25 cars meeting safety standards, they could have engines with a capacity of up to 5 litres. Porsche recognized that they would need to do more than just upgrade their existing 3-litre engine. They would have to build 25 cars within just 10 months, a task that seemed impossible. Failure, however, was not an option. Over the next few months, the company worked tirelessly, involving almost every employee in the creation process, even accountants who were likely unaware of what awaited them. By the second half of 1968, the factory had indeed produced 25 cars in 10 months, an unimaginable feat. It is safe to assume that engineers spent very little time with their families, instead spending months buried in complex calculations to make Porsche's goal a reality. On March 31, 1969, Porsche accomplished the unthinkable. Led by engineer Hans Mezger, the team managed to build sports cars ready for inspection by the International Committee. There were allegations that Porsche bent the rules, with half of the cars sitting on truck axles and not ready for the road, but the lineup passed the test after 10 exhausting months and countless hours of overtime. Porsche finally got the 917 where it belonged, on the racetrack. But what made Porsche believe the 917 would be their ticket to victory? They were, after all, up against manufacturers with much larger budgets and proven track records. The first thing to know is that the 917 was exceptionally light. Weighing around 800 kilograms, it was almost 200 kg lighter than some competitors. This weight reduction was achieved through exceptional engineering efforts, including using titanium suspension joints, an aluminum steering box, and a fiberglass body. The core of Porsche's innovative approach lay in a revolutionary chassis developed by engineer Helmut Bott. The frame weighed just 42 Klauen, about as much as a large fish. The construction consisted of tubes welded together to form triangles. To keep the weight down, Porsche used a unique aluminum alloy for these tubes, which were less than 2 mm thick. Engineers calculated the maximum forces expected during a race to determine the exact strength required for each tube. Since there were no modern computers or software available, these calculations were meticulously made by hand. Any human error could have led to disastrous results. To identify potential issues, the team pressurized the chassis tubes with gas, which would indicate any cracks or weaknesses by a reduction in pressure. Combined with all these lightweight components was Porsche's first 12-cylinder engine, each unit producing 580 horsepower. The engine alone took 160 hours to complete and consisted of some exotic alloys. After months of secret testing and innovative breakthroughs, the Porsche 917 entered the 24 Hours of Le Mans. The results, however, were disastrous. Let's get one thing straight. When the 917 hit the road, no one doubted it was fast. In fact, one unit managed to reach over 300 km/h on the Mulsanne Straight. However, many drivers were reluctant to get behind the wheel, preferring to drive the 908 instead. The 917 proved unreliable and, to say the least, challenging. Piëch's determination to perfect the design was evident, but as cars hit the track, problems arose. At the 1969 Le Mans, a British driver, John Wolfe, tragically lost his life in a crash during the first lap. Another 917 experienced an oil leak in the 15th hour, and one more lost its clutch just 2 hours before the finish. The car earned a reputation as a widow-maker among automotive circles. Even the brilliant Porsche team struggled to understand what went wrong. Despite pouring vast amounts of money into building the 917, its colossal failure could have marked the end of the road for the cash-strapped team. However, Piëch reached out to John Wyer of the Gulf-sponsored JW Automotive Engineering team to manage the car in the 1970 World Championship. Several months later, Porsche and Wyer's teams came together in Austria to continue working on the problematic car. JW's engineer, John Horsman, noticed an unusual detail. Unlike most cars that would collect bugs on their windshields while driving at high speeds, no bugs were hitting the back of the 917. This realization led to Horsman's aha moment. The car's aerodynamics were flawed. The air wasn't flowing correctly over the car's tail, which meant that the 917 wasn't generating any downforce to keep it on the ground. As a temporary solution, the engineers equipped the car with metal plates fastened with tape and screws. Over the next few nights, Horsman and other engineers redesigned the rear, making the tail more compact and adding aluminum sheets to the body above the rear wheel. The new tail, known as the K, or short tail, proved much more stable. The redesigned 917K was soon tested by driver Brian Redman, one of the car's biggest skeptics. After completing a lap, he famously exclaimed, "Now this is a race car." In the following months, the 917K consistently demonstrated its superiority. At the 1970 Le Mans, the car performed impeccably under challenging, rainy conditions. Drivers Richard Atwood and Hans Hermann drove the newly refreshed car to victory after 24 hours of racing, giving Porsche and Piëch their first win at Le Mans. The following year, Porsche improved the car even further, introducing a magnesium chassis that made it even lighter and adding iconic details. The 917 was featured in the famous film Le Mans, starring Steve McQueen, cementing its place in history. That year, drivers Gijs van Lennep and Helmut Marko won the race, setting records for speed and distance that stood for decades. By the end of the season, the Porsche 917 dominated the World Championship, winning nearly every race. The car's success was so overwhelming that the FIA eventually banned 5-litre, 12-cylinder engines, marking the end of an era. However, by that point, Porsche had nothing left to prove. Piëch and his visionary team had delivered an unbeatable car, giving fans a story to remember for decades. Today, Porsche remains the most successful manufacturer at Le Mans, with 19 victories to its name, a testament to a legacy born from the challenges and triumphs of the 917.